Okay, I want to talk about two television series, web series, what have you, that are based on superhero-oriented comic books. I had said a while back that I was going to take a long moratorium from works based on comics, specifically on superhero-themed comics. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness was going to be my final plunge into that till Thor: Love and Thunder, which opened today. Now, Thor: Love and Thunder, I'm obviously not, well, the way things are going, not going to be able to see it for a while. Oh, I'm determined to see it in the theater, but it will be over. If anybody wants to buy me a ticket, my beautiful patrons, please do. I would love you forever. Right now, everyone who could help me out is in dire straits themselves, and I understand. Or just wanting to see it themselves and not live vicariously through me, and I understand that. So, here's the deal. Here, I want to talk about these two shows, The Boys and Ms. Marvel. Now, I've touched on Ms. Marvel in one of my streaming episodes previously, just the first episode and my impressions of it. My conclusion was that despite any good intentions or groundbreaking ground that was broken by having kind of a Muslim sitcom based on Ugly Betty. It was like Ugly Betty, but Muslim instead of Hispanic. But despite those positive attempts, that it was what I deemed an artistic failure. That was pretty harsh. So I've watched episodes 2, 3, and 4. 5 dropped 2 days ago. I have not begun 5. I may never begin 5. The Boys, I've followed since the beginning. I was familiar with the concept of the comic book, and that it was Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson, who are a great team. I love Robertson's work in Marvel during the golden Bill Jemas years. He was such an unconventional guy to be drawing Wolverine and the Punisher, and I loved it. Him and Greg Rucka had an incredible brief Wolverine run that I loved and still do. But yeah, Garth Ennis, of course, Garth Ennis. Preacher. Not the show. The show is crap, but this comic book series, if you read the whole thing, it's a powerful work. It has a distinctive ending to it. And he kind of plows through all of the sacrilege and gore and taboo busting and irreverence to find a very compassionate beating heart in the midst of it at the ending. I love that about him. I think it's fantastic. So Ennis seems to hate superheroes. He did some pretty funny work with them in a couple of Punisher issues that I just think are delightful, but we'll get into here. He's done some science fiction recently. I forgot the name of it, but it's a pretty good one. Good art. Kind of an alien-esque story. He's done a lot of work I haven't read. I'm not familiar with. I was surprised that The Boys were published by Dynamite Entertainment. They began kind of inauspiciously kind of struggling by taking public domain or borderline public domain science fiction, superhero, pulp hero characters and crafting new adventures or reboots or reimagining their origins. And I read quite a lot of it. I was a comics critic online for this site called the Comics Forge, for about a year, 2011 to 2012. So you can still find my reviews, some of my reviews there. I read a lot of hack and slash, a lot. But I reviewed a lot of other things too, some of which she's taken down. I guess just seeing it not being relevant, maybe, whereas hack and slash is still a popular, thing ongoing. But I reviewed several Dynamite Entertainment ones, like their take on Flash Gordon, and their take on the Bionic Man, aka $6 Million Man, written by Kevin Smith. And I had some familiarity on Comixology, whatever site, because originally they were sending me hard copy comics. So then I began reviewing, things online, reading them online, and there were attempts to, use John Carter of Mars and then bring in Tarzan. So their work, was kind of on the edge, and it bothered a lot of people who were into this stuff. Some of whom are friends of mine, What bothered me really was the low quality of the work. I mean, I was fine with seeing a ton of John Carter and Deja Thoris comics, albeit the Deja Thoris stuff really was like just a little too much cheesecake. I mean, Frank Frazetta knew the line to draw to make a character like Deja Thoris alluring and extremely sexual, vivacious energy, without kind of winking at the audience and, flailing, what was the phrase, twerking her ass. There's a place for twerking the ass, and I don't think comic books based on Edgar Rice Burroughs are I don't think that's one of the places for it, in my opinion. My humble, narrow-minded opinion. I think Deja Thoris should eliminate the twerking from her repertoire. So anyway, years went by, and Dynamite Entertainment decided to publish Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson's The Boys, and it became a big deal because of the personalities involved and the fact that, they were big names to be working with Dynamite. I never read the comic, though. Now, years later, I did read the entire comic online. It wasn't that long ago, within the last year. I had seen seasons 1 and 2. I had enjoyed them. What I found from reading the comic book was that the further the show went along, especially deep into season 2, the more it departed from the source material. So normally that might bother me, because I'm not a purist per se, but I do think that generally, if you're adapting material that's sound and solid, the closer you are to the spirit of that material, or the letter of it, even, the more I'm going to personally enjoy it. That's just me. That's just me. And there are exceptions on all ends of the spectrum. There are exceptions. What I found with The Boys was that the concept, of course, was exactly the same. Some cosmetic changes were made to some of the characters for the show. Some necessary, some, I don't want to say arbitrary. I mean, they carefully adapted it, but they adapted it in a way where they could make a long-running series open-ended and explore this kind of science fiction alternate world with a lot of the dark humor and satire and irreverence and just plain darkness and violence, carnality, run amok. That spirit that's in Garth Ennis in a lot of his work, and especially, and it is in The Boys. The problem with it is there is a compassionate beating heart toward the end of The Boys, and it's in the character of Huey in this long conversation he has with Annie, aka Starlight, a soup who he is in love with, having an affair, and he he's lambasted her over things that really she has no control over anymore. They're in the past. They bother him. It's kind of like chasing Amy. I've been that way before with girlfriends, many years ago. But I think if you're a fairly inexperienced guy and you get with someone who has had certain sexual experiences, either the kind of experience or the amount of the experiences or the amount of partners, you can get intimidated and you can get resentful and want to go, why'd you do that? But it's none of our concern, man. Let's just enjoy these wonderful women while they're with us and not judge what they did before us. That's my current and long running philosophy. But I was once a little like Huey and a little like Holden McNeil and chasing Amy. I have a close friend who didn't like the way Huey acted out these feelings. He thought Huey was being a dick. And the way Huey was being a dick, for real. But I think it was a valuable and well done thing to plot toward the end, or before final act. And I like it when Ennis does that. But the problem is with reading The Boys, the comic book, is after that scenario, after that scene played out over quite a number of pages, it seems like Ennis shot his proverbial load. In other words, I feel like he ran, I don't want to say ran out of ideas. Like, a guy like him rarely runs out of ideas. But lost interest. Like, okay, I've got this, incredibly irreverent, savage attack on superheroes. This obviously a taking works like Alan Moore's Miracle Man and Watchmen and Mark Gruenwald's Squadron Supreme, ones that show the dark side of superheroes and taking them to their absolute utmost extreme. And that seemed like he was the guy to do that. There are other people who hate superheroes who have tried to do stuff like this, and sometimes with the actual mainstream Marvel DC characters. Foremost is Mark Millar. Millar would probably deny this depending on who's interviewing him. But he obviously hates superheroes. He obviously hates Marvel superheroes, and his work on the Ultimates to me was reprehensible pretty much. I mean, again, that sounds like I'm a purist and he fucked up my characters and ruined my childhood. I don't mean it to sound that way. I want to go into the root of his not right now, but I wanted to go into the root of his motives. Like, why did he depict the Avengers this way? Why did he depict the Defenders this way? His Defenders issue was, I don't know. Is it a what if? Like, what if these people were just like losers who just had the basic iconography of these characters from the Defenders? Or are the Defenders losers to Millar? And I strongly get the idea that the latter is the case. I'm not a fan of Mark Millar's work. I like some of his work, early work on Swamp Thing that I've read. Grant Morrison helped kind of break him in America. They co-wrote Swamp Thing for a number of issues after Nancy Collins left. By that time, I had stopped collecting, but I picked up a few of them. I'm going to sell them if anyone's interested. But I'm selling all my Swamp Things. But the stuff I've read since, like, I hate Civil War. Love the movie. Hate the comic book. Concept was cool. The way it was carried out was not cool. Because ultimately, and again, I could be totally wrong, and if so, I'll admit it. Ultimately, it became obvious to me that Millar's sympathies in the Civil War among these superheroes lie with Iron Man. You know that he didn't want to classify Iron Man as a supervillain. Marvel was afraid. They were pussies editorially. You know, Tom Brevoort's up jumping on tables at conventions and talking shit to fans on alt, news groups. Fuck him. And, about why they should like Civil War, why they shouldn't hate. It's like, hey, we have brains. We're using them. And we don't need you to tell us what to like and why to like it. And I'm going into a lot of this because it does circle around to Marvel, because I'm going to get to Ms. Marvel after the boys. So, I feel like you had Captain America, who symbolized an absolutist morality, idealist morality of what America should be like, total freedom, autonomy, et cetera, et cetera. And that was translated beautifully in the movie. Beautifully. And Tony he wasn't really a super villain. He was just ruthless, pushed to being ruthless. But he had a heart. And the letter that Steve writes him at the end is really incredible. And Tony still did dickish things for a while up until Infinity War, but, he redeemed himself. But the comic book Iron Man, on paper, ostensibly, we're told redeemed himself. Yeah, in the few books that I read, sample, that were supposed to be the key texts to this, I didn't see that. I didn't see a redemption. I didn't see a punishment. Closest was when Thor beat him to the ground. But it was like, Marvel pulls his punches. They don't kill people for good. They don't make permanent changes in their soul. They used to. It's just stasis. It's continuing the status quo, and I hate the status quo. And I think that form of, I think it's proven by long form shows on cable, long form storytelling, and the enduring few soap operas that are out there. People want to see a mini series. People want to see a multi-part story and characters within that story. Even if that story has a definitive end, that's fine. But along the way, there's the journey, and they change, they grow, or they degrade. They become better people, worse people. With Marvel, there's always the reset button, the great reset, to quote the dubious Klaus Schwab. Please, you can research him if you're inclined. I didn't like formula shows when I was a kid. I wanted to read, because I read comic books with ongoing stories, and I watched soap operas, and I didn't like shows like Star Trek, where I liked Star Trek okay, but I didn't like the fact Kirk would fall madly in love with this woman, and then it'd be over, and then the next episode, there's no mention of anything. There's no verisimilitude. So all that has changed, and Marvel kind of plays at it. But their writers are so void of soul and passion, because it's just about the thrill. To me, it's the thrill to them, like the thrill and the power and the money. When I say power, it's like, oh, good, I get to sit in on a committee and help this committee storytelling. I've got power. Oh. Jim Starlin had power. Look at the Warlock arc up to the death of Captain Marvel, and then there was nothing for years. What, 7, 8 years? All those characters stayed dead, and that was a statement, a powerful statement. Marvel undid all of it, because you had company men like John Byrne and Jim Shooter who wanted what one guy that I know calls the illusion of change. And I don't like that philosophy. He credited the quote to Stan Lee that Marvel promotes the illusion of change. My work promotes the reality of progress. That's what I want. And progress can go either way. I mean, it can be regression. Things can get worse. The world can, succumb to entropy, but it's still change. A world of change and hopefully some growth and learning. I'm putting that out there for certain people they're watching. So where does this leave the boys? Well, my verdict on the comic book was I didn't like it. I mean, I liked the characters in the beginning. I liked the concept. I thought it was funny. I thought it was shocking. I thought the art was cool. I was a little disturbed that toward the end, Derek Robertson kind of missed so many issues. I think it took away a lot of that, creator being involved kind of thing. And I think it was like they succumbed to the dreaded deadline doom, as Marvel used to call it, I guess, with Dynamite Entertainment. I'm just spitballing. I'm not sure what happened. All I know is I feel like Garth Ennis lost interest, didn't know how to end it, and then basically came up with everything you'd think is false. Was false. So that's the very thing that, we got told again and again, those of us who were kind of in the late 80s, kind of, I was in college, but I was socially behind several years. I was clinging to the idea that Marvel was still going to be putting out works like it did in the 60s and especially the 70s. Here I am, 85, 86, 87, and I've become a DC fan. Occasionally I'm reading Marvel and I'm hoping, and all I'm seeing is regression, retrogression, not progress. The illusion of change, yeah. The illusion of a lot more than change. The illusion of quality. The illusion of meaning. It all became a big, overinflated Rob Liefeld drawing. So who cares? I quit collecting Marvel comics, I guess, in 92, early 92, until 2000, when Grant Morrison took over X-Men. I finished collecting Vertigo in 94. It just, I couldn't afford it to keep buying the books, and I was losing touch with, I felt the characters were going places that I couldn't identify with anymore. It wasn't necessarily that they were bad, and there was change. There was change, especially in Shade, the Changing Man. But I didn't like all of the change in Shade. But I respected it. And Doom Patrol went somewhere else. Unfortunate. So did Animal Man. All my favorites. Preacher was the head of the line, the beacon. But I didn't read it. But later I read the collected work. So here we come full circle to Garth Ennis. What's his face? Seth Rogen, produced and had a big hand in the, to me, horrible Preacher TV series. Apparently he has a big hand in The Boys, which I didn't realize. I don't know how big. It's a little bit of a taint, but it hasn't shown up in the work. However, he does make a guest appearance in a comedic cameo in one of the issues. When I say comedic quotes, because I don't find anything Seth Rogen ever utters funny or humorous or intelligent or worthwhile to listen to. I mean, nothing. And I've heard numerous interviews with him and seen him in several films. And I feel like he's a worthless individual as a creative person. It's like he's struggling to be this person, and he never will. But people love mediocrity, and so they are okay with him just staying Seth Rogen. You know, he seems like he wants to grow and change, uh, but he just keeps falling back on being Seth Rogen. It's a shtick. You know, a person becomes a parody of themselves. You know, a caricature, and they become comfortable in it because no one tells them no, because they have all this money and power, and yeah, it's weird. But so anyway, The Boys. I loved the show though. I'm not going to review the show. I never intended to do that, but I am going to talk about season 3. So season 2, like I said, veered further and further from the comic books, which was a good thing because a lot of the things that ultimately were revealed in the comics would have destroyed the TV series, and I had this fear with season 3 that that was going to happen because season 3 did do fan service to fans of the comic and introduced more elements like Soldier Boy and the Payback, uh, Huey and Billy getting the V and having powers sometimes to fight the Supes. Um, there's some other things too. Well, the tension with Starlight and Huey, though, it was different in the comics, differently spawned, but that was there. So there was more alignment with and shout out to and use of the concepts. The Herogasm, of course, was one that were in the comic books. So that's cool. I'm thinking that's fine, and it was interpreted still within their framework. And a lot of I read some fanboys, you know, on YouTube slamming the hell out of uh, season 3 because it changed so much, and they thought it was weak and pussy. I'm like, man, these people, yeah, how violent does something have to be? I mean, you know, Serbian film. I'm jaded. Yeah, I want the real shit. You know, The Boys. The show isn't nearly as hardcore as the comics. Man, this is a curse of horror fans that some horror fans have, and some people just in fandom in general. And I wonder, you know, what are their limits? What will sate them? Uh, I'm pretty easily sated. I'm not desensitized. That's what I was. They're desensitized. Uh, I do seek out things that challenge me and possibly will repulse me. It is a part of my journey as an artist and a appreciator of art. And I guess if you want to label me a fan, you know, even though that has so many negative connotations, I don't feel part of fandom. Um, but I'm still shocked. I'm still repulsed. You know, I've talked about all this in my Serbian film review and some other reviews. Uh, so I'm not jaded. I take the work head on for what it is. I try to. So with The Boys, I mean, there were shocking moments in The Boys show. Like I said, I saw it before I read the. There's a particular scene where Kamiko comes up behind a character and grabs his face like around the ear and just rips it off. And I mean, it's kind of fast. I had to rewind it a few times, but it's like everything pulls away and everything is exposed under the layers of skin. It's so realistic. The gore effects in this are incredible, and I think they do Garth Ennis, you know, proud. And um, I really, really, you know, I mean, I read A Feast Unknown when I was 15, 14, 15. So, I mean, it repulsed me. But I mean, it definitely sparked something. Um, so things like what Ennis is doing with superheroes being ultra violent, to me, his work is descended from Thor. He's taking these archetypes, and the difference is Farmer actually loved the pulp heroes. Uh, but he also was like, let's get real, you know? And they're fans of those characters who don't like Farmer because of that. You know, they think, well, he got a little too real there. I don't feel that way. I think his deconstructions were brilliant, and they don't undermine his love for the mainline safer versions. He did do a Tarzan novel authorized and a Doc Savage authorized novel. He was able to write for different markets. He had that ability. A lot of professional writers, at least in days of yore, had that. They had to. It was how they survived commercially. I tried to be that way too. When I was starting to work with the Comic Book Artists Guild, I tried to fashion my pitches to whatever their concept was. That's how my comic book Snow Leopard got published. The only comic book I've ever done that's been published and distributed, albeit, not widely really. So I'd like to say that season 3 of The Boys was more of the same. It had these intense moments. It had these gruesome moments. The character of Soldier Boy, cosmetically at least, was, yes, obviously a parody, as my friend Tim Tolbert said, of the Chris Evans Captain America. And he was a vicious right winger of the greatest generation, quote unquote. Just as Homelander was a vicious right winger of the modern era, kind of a new Aryan, cat, and of course his lover was, full blown Nazi. I mean, right now we have Nazis invading, and infiltrating the governments and systems and the justice system, the law enforcement system, all over the world. And it seems almost de rigueur, but, the media is afraid to call a Nazi, and it's too bad. It's sad. Hating Nazis is not just a remnant, of lip service. Because I'm not a macho guy. I wasn't born during World War. I wasn't born until way after World War II. My dad didn't even really see action in it, though he was in it. But I don't think we should have bombed Japan. That's disgusting. And I mean, America and the Nazis were already allies up until the war. They joined the war. A lot of crazy shit, and it's kind of happening again. It's repeating itself now with this Ukraine thing, and I won't go any further than that. But I like the way The Boys is exploring that in season 3. They have one eye open to what's happening in the current political climate, which Ennis didn't do except with his his version of 9/11, which I thought was pretty incredible. I wish they'd adapted that, but they did not. That was a strong statement. It was a very strong statement against people like Dick Cheney, who walked free when they should be in The Hague or whatever, in a dungeon, suffering. There were revelations in season 3, and they were kind of weird. And spoilers. So, Homelander is Soldier Boy's son. His genetic material was used to create Homelander. And Homelander has managed to turn Ryan, his son, with Becca, onto his side, partially because Butcher was being a dick to Ryan. I mean, he had his reasons to distance himself from Ryan, but, he's confused, of course. Like, I promised Becca I'd take care of Ryan, but Ryan's still a suit. But he did protect Ryan. Him and the character Grace Mallory, they protected them. They gave Ryan a safe house and were kind of raising him. But Homelander found Ryan. Since he'd had a break with Billy, he went back to Homelander. And Ryan is becoming quite a little bastard. He literally was a little bastard. as Soldier Boy said, something like that little shit, and he really is a little shit. I mean, the last episode, ends with him kind of looking at the camera, and it's almost like Damien the Omen too. He's going to grow into this monster. Some characters died for good in the finale. One character died, and I knew she was going to die. And I was like, okay, this is going to happen. This really validates this character, and it really showed the best of the character before it happened. But then for some reason, they had her survive and go into hiding. There was Queen Maeve. And I don't understand why they did that. It seemed like they wanted her to have a happy ending with her lesbian girlfriend, which is fine, but they established early on that when Soldier Boy explodes, the people that survive, the Supes, because normal humans don't survive it, are depowered. So they planted that early on, and so she became a regular human. It's kind of like the end of the Eternals movie, where they shuffle them off different places, and some have happy endings, and some have beginnings of new adventures, and Sprite's a human, and I don't know where the show's going. The epilogue was long, and I do like that. I do like the fact that they didn't keep the action and violence all the way to the end to be the end. I like that they gave it some room to breathe and show the repercussions of it. Some of which, I personally am not interested in, like the Deep. I really have no investment in that character. And A-Train, they serve their purpose, as did Black Noir. But Black Noir now, his purpose has really been served, and it is a huge departure from his origin in the comic books. I'm very glad. I'm very glad they stayed on that path, away from the ending that I personally hated in the comics. And I'll rarely say things like this, but this is how I feel about it. Conversely, Ms. Marvel is a very cynical show. I don't mean the characters and actors and whatever writing are cynical. Though there are characters who are pretty cynical, like Kamala's mother is. Kamala's mother is the character that they really don't have a handle on, and I don't know that they're going to get one. I already talked about episode 1 and everything. She gets her powers. So by episode 4, she still doesn't have her costume, but she's putting together ideas for it, using her powers more. It's like a guy at work I talked to today about it. He was like, yeah, she bumps into this guy who's a red dagger, and he wears a mask, and they're running, and they're fighting the clandestine, and then she goes and hangs out with them, and then there's this other guy, and then she hangs out at this, like, barbecue or something. They're all, like, cooking around a campfire, talking, telling things about each other, and then it just kind of goes on. And it's true. And then season 4 also, episode 4, also has a scene where Kamala's mother starts giving the grandmother a massage, and then they speak back and forth in English and then some in, I'm not sure of the Pakistani language, with subtitles. I wish the English had subtitles too, or maybe not, because it's like, okay, we're showing another element or dimension to the mother character, but they're not interesting to me. I don't feel anything, and I think the hoax that Marvel and the media that support Marvel's contention that this is like their most brilliant thing they've ever done, more or less. But the hoax is that, if you don't like those passages or understand why they're there, what function do they serve to further the story or characters, then of course you're racist, you're anti-Muslim, you're Islamophobe, you're sexist, misogynist. It's almost like Hillary Clinton took over Disney and Marvel. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, Ms. Marvel, if you could separate the hype the Disney generated and Marvel generated away and separate out the I don't like to use this term because I always used it as a term of enlightenment, but it's been co-opted like hell and used by right wingers very badly, like they always do. But this woke thing, which they say they hate about it, when I said it was a cynical show, it's very calculated. Like, got through episode 4 and I don't know what the show's about. I don't know what the show's trying to say. It seems like it's trying to be a travelogue / historical dive into the Pakistani culture and Muslim culture, and also their banal slice of life, how they live their life, and a teenage girl who's a nerd who really is a nerd, and Kamala just isn't. I think Iman Vellani is doing the best she can. This is her first acting on screen, and it really does show. She needs a much firmer director, and she needs a better script to bring that character all the way to life. She's kind of got a spark. It's because she's likable and she's pretty, and she's not like model looking like most women in these movies. And when I say women, she is a woman. She's playing a 16-year-old character, but when she filmed it, she was 18. She's 19, going on 20 now. So, it's kind of like Tom Holland, was 19 playing 15. I don't have a problem with that. But, I feel like her character seems very uncomfortable in all these scenarios. Like she hasn't found herself. And maybe that's the theme or part of it. But in a way, I feel like the actress feels uncomfortable. And then that makes me uncomfortable. It's like she doesn't know what to say. She doesn't know what to do. So how is she going to be a hero? Is the thrust of the story that she fails at being a hero, or that she somehow inexplicably, against all logic and odds, succeeds at becoming a hero? And I think the latter is probably what they'll try to tell us happened. But again, as I've said many times, I have 5 senses that function. I'm watching the show, and I'm seeing a show that's deliberately belaboring scenes that don't serve the greater narrative, but are attempting to establish a milieu. I love foreign movies. I love the other. I love blaxploitation movies, or any black movies with black casts or creators. Love Asian movies. I love Indian movies. Come on. I mean, this shit is not Satyajit Ray. Ray. Let's just be frank about it. I mean, just because they film on location there, if they did, I don't know, and just because they're making all these references to things in their culture and teaching people, and I don't have a problem with that. It's just that they draw so much attention to it. The timing is so bad, and that, of course, a lot of great humor, if not all, is predicated on timing, and so the humor is really, it's bad. It's not funny. Eternals had this problem too. Both of them have taken this Marvel style where they say something really cheesy and endemic of the current pop culture, like a nudge, nudge, wink. Like you're kind of winking with the character, but you're also kind of winking at the character, like laughing at the character, and then they stop and they extend it by several seconds, and there's that stop and that timing. And I understand that kind of comedy, that can be really funny, but the stops are getting longer and longer, and things rolling into it are getting less and less funny or interesting or relevant. Um, there needs to be more chaos in the comedy. There needs to be more freewheeling. You know, I mean, Shang-Chi had a lot of energy in the movie. That's one thing I loved about it is that, and it's not even my favorite Marvel movie, don't get me wrong, but it is to me one of the better ones. And again, that's another culture. I'm totally into it, interested in it. It told the story. It integrated all the stories. You know, him as a Shang-Chi as a Chinese American guy named Sean, and then his childhood as this, you know, being forged into a living weapon. And then, of course, him embracing his destiny as Shang-Chi, the Ten Rings, and then having to kill his father, and his reaction to all the different characters. Um, he's not a child, though. You know, he's mid-20s. And I don't know. It was just so much better done. And then Moon Knight, obviously, dissociative identity disorder. And our man Oscar Isaac doing as many different crazy riffs as possible. An acting tour de force. He was filled with energy. The lady who played his wife, I can't remember the actress's name, she was also. Um, Ethan Hawke. And I can't say he was filled with energy. He was dry and kind of, as some people said, kind of phoned it in. I don't think he really phoned it in. I think he was trying to portray. I think he was trying to portray a character that was just that cold. Like the apocalypse is coming, judgment. This is what has to be done. So what it is, and that's supposed to be menacing. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. But then when he played the psychiatrist version of the character, it was a little bit of a flip, and it was never explained. But it didn't need to be explained because to me it was interesting, And that came around episode 4, a sudden huge shift. Like everything you thought you believed is true is false. So Ms. Marvel has done this too. By the end of season 4, all of a sudden, like a lot of her enemies are dead, a lot of her allies are dead. She's lost in Karachi or wherever, and suddenly she's tripped through time to this mass migration in 1942. And I don't know enough history of that region to say what happened or to say how authentic it is. Seems like they're trying to do a real authentic job. It feels like they're trying to do what Watchmen did for Tulsa in the 20s and Black Wall Street. Show a massive cultural diaspora and how that ties in and affects the heroes. So how is it going to affect Ms. Marvel? And if I were a Ms. Marvel comic book fan, is that part of her story and motivation? It seems like they can't decide what she is. I mean, is she magic? Is she a djinn? Like I said, I don't think the show knows what it wants to do, but it's taking that gamble that Moon Knight took and suddenly, boom, transplanting you somewhere else. But before they transplanted Mark into the dream, into the asylum, where him and Steven both exist, there was a lot going on. I mean, fucking Harrow shot him, and he literally killed him. Because they established Khonshu has the power over life and death. See, these are interesting things. And a lot of them come from other cultures, like Egypt. I don't understand why you have to try to accentuate this culture and make it so boring and make the characters so cheesy. I mean, obviously you're pandering to children who are watching this. I feel like the boys and Ms. Marvel, to conclude here, are like they're like nemesis of each other. I feel as though Ms. Marvel is the anti-boys. Like Disney's gonna show a clean version, so clean, we're going to regress all of our storytelling to a childlike level, and we're going to spoon feed you a culture and how you're supposed to feel about it. Again, you know, I can feel about it how I want to feel about it. I mean, you know, uh, the culture isn't the problem. It's really not. The fact the family are Muslim is not the problem. The fact the family are a bunch of really unlikable, poorly cast, unlikable characters, poorly cast actors with inscrutable motives or motives that are just banal that we've seen done a million times. The mother frets, I'm worried about my daughter. And sometimes the mother speaks as someone who has lived in America a while. And naturalistically, that happens a lot in episode 4. That was a good progression. Because a lot of times she speaks in these extreme broken accent, broken English, and says these aphorisms. And to me, that's a cultural stereotype. I mean, I work with and service a lot of Indian people in my part of town. Some of them talk that way, that kind of stereotype, like, you know, I tell you, this is a bad thing, and the blah blah will strike you down. And yeah, there's a few people that, I mean, they don't really say that. They usually say things like, you are not giving me a discount on that phone and computer. You will pay punished. But it's like most of them don't talk that way in conversation. They're not that uptight. And in Kamala's family, every character talks that way at least once per episode. And the mother's the worst. You know, the mother is just an aphorism factory, but none of them are real wisdom. It's like, okay, so she had a grandmother who was a jinn. She has some mystic connection. She's from another culture. So she's supposed to be wise, but she's like a total loser. I mean, she has no charisma, nothing to say of value except, you know, belittling her daughter, belittling everything, mocking it, making fun of it. And it's from a very cultural stereotyped angle, like America, all these American ways, oh, you kids and your Avengers. And it's like, okay, first of all, this takes place in the MCU. Half of all living beings in the universe died. Did she die? Did people she know die? They haven't even mentioned the blips effect on that family. Who lived? Who died? What did it do? I mean, it was mentioned in Eternals. It was mentioned just kind of barely in passing at Looting and Moon Knight. So what the fuck? You know, I mean, haven't those experiences changed these ordinary people? I mean, they changed people like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. You know, I mean, they changed Hawkeye. I don't get it. You know, where are they going with this? What is the point of it? So anyway, like I said, I'm going to conclude 5 minutes later. I believe that Ms. Marvel is like the anti-boys. Like, you know, we have a critic-proof show. If you don't like the show or say anything about these kind of scenes that I've been criticizing harshly, then you're insulting their attempts at multiculturalism. You're insulting their attempts to finally show a ordinary Muslim American family and their dynamics, even though all their dynamics are like ripped off of 5,000 other sitcoms. There's nothing remarkable except some cultural things like what they wear, certain words, allusions, what they eat, you know, certain, rituals of theirs they talk about. And that's fine, but they talk about them and they never really circle around to having any feed into enriching the story, and worse, enriching the characters. Like, where does Kamala stand on Islam? Why does her best friend wear the hijab and she doesn't? I mean, there's just like, See, I can write this better. This is so ridiculous. And the boys is a tonic for Ms. Marvel. So if Ms. Marvel is too sweet for you the way it is for me, and sweet I'm using relative, more like, bad for your digestion, your esophagus, all the way down to your intestines, where they feel like they're being ripped out, like Homelander ripping out Noir. Spoiler! Then you need the boys. Because there was a conversation between Huey and Annie Starlight in the last episode in a car, and they're just talking, and isn't that so many relationships, a heavy talk in a car. And they were real. I mean, the Huey was making some analogy about his dad, and the analogy itself was kind of corny, and he acknowledged it was corny. And then he went into it anyway and what it meant to him, and he was earnest, and Annie's listening and absorbing, and there's relating going on. There's not, I don't know, in Ms. Marvel, there's a giant disconnect. That one scene in The Boys, which isn't even the best heartfelt scene in The Boys, but the best in the last few episodes. That one scene in The Boys has more sincerity and depth and meaning and craft to the way it's written and shot, acted, and well made than all of Ms. Marvel's 4 episodes that I've seen, no matter how many cool colors they bombard us with. That crazy magenta color everyone loves, including me. I love it. It's mesmerizing. They're using those colors I talked about. The color out of space, the colors in Mandy and in Bliss. Those things are affecting the collective mind these days. I've always liked them. I've always felt an affinity with them. So when I see them, I'll watch. They'll draw me in, and I'll be like, "Hey, what's going on?" And then I'll get disappointed. This is Miss Marvel, and it's too bad. Wow, I could go on forever, but I won't. I liked the last episode of The Boys. I didn't like every conclusion, but I thought the majority of them grew out of the characters' powers, and the fighting and the violence was consistent with what we know about the characters, and also revealing. Like, we really see Maeve's, how strong she really is, but also her limitations, and how pissed off she can get. And we saw how violent Homelander, we've seen that a million times. Seen how violent Homelander could get and sadistic with Maeve. Like, he's holding back, trying not to hurt her. But, he hurts her. Yeah, it was a good episode. I thought Kamiko and Frenchie were really touching in the last 2 episodes. Kamiko that's just a gorgeous actress. Her eyes are so expressive. She's taken that character, the female from the comics, who was a cool and ferocious Asian woman character, and she's just infused her with this kind of innocence, and yet she could go feral anytime. But she lost her powers for a while, and then she wanted them back. And Frenchie, he's a druggie, but he's also a brilliant chemist. He's trying to salve his conscience over being an assassin and all these things he's done. But he helps save the day with the drugs. Everything came together. And I was glad it came together. I don't know if it has the strength to maintain this level of quality going into season 4 with what they've left us with. I'm not sure. I'm skeptical, to be real honest. I almost feel like they should quit while they're ahead. But I was pleased. Ms. Marvel, I wanted to be able to see episode 5 before I did this, but I don't know, man. That's a bad thing when I can't finish a show like this. So anyway, I have spoken. Let the merriment begin. Let the critiques fall. Let the power fall, as Robert Fripp said, under heavy manners. Love you guys.